over a century, Morgan State University has served as a beacon of educational opportunity. But what truly sets Morgan State apart is its vibrant athletic culture. The legacy of the Bears proved that the university's athletes are renowned not only for their physical prowess, but also for their intellectual achievements. From the classrooms and laboratories to the playing fields and courts, excellence is both expected and celebrated.
When you talk about the history of Morgan athletics, you can go at least back to the late 1800s when Morgan was still located at the corner of Edmondson and Fulton Avenue. Our current football stadium, W.A.C. Hughes Stadium, William Alfred Carroll Hughes, who is known as the father of Morgan football. And when Morgan was still located at Edmondson and Fulton Avenue, he came as a freshman in 1893, and he brought what is believed to be the first football to Morgan's campus. And at that time, the campus again was just one building at the corner. And down the hill, there was a field at what was called Goose Hill, and he organized one of the first scrimmages of Morgan men. So that was 1893. He graduated in 1897, had a phenomenal career with the Methodist Church. He was actually the first African American to be elected to the bishopric.
The earliest documented athletic event at Morgan would be the football team. I brought some images for you to look at that chronicled the 1890s and the early quarter of the 20th century, with small teams that would scrimmage in what we now call the Dust Bowl, here at the corner of Hillen Road and Cold Spring. So you see, even in the yearbooks, they actually sought to commemorate those individuals who were dynamic athletes. Here's an actual picture of what is called the Dust Bowl. This was then the Morgan Athletic Stadium. And so you're going from this space where it is unleveled, gravelly rock space to a much more organized stadium space that would eventually become Hughes Memorial Stadium.
During the early 20th century, sports played a pivotal role in the Morgan community by serving as a significant source of funding while also providing a safe space for Black individuals. Despite being viewed as inferior to their white counterparts, sports provided a sense of identity and unity for Black folks within the community.
There was a time when an HBCU football game, Morgan against Howard, that was like, for Black folks, that was like going to the Grammys or something. I've got pictures of ladies with their hair done up. They got on fur coats and stuff because there weren't a whole lot of places where Blacks could go.
Morgan coach Dr. Charles Richard Drew upstarted the culture of gentleman scholar athletes at Morgan. Making a name for himself as father of the blood bank, Drew discovered a technique to better efficiently store blood. His passion for both athletics and academics was passed down to his players.
People know Charles Drew, blood plasma, the Red Cross, and Howard University Hospital, but few people know that he was a nationally ranked world-class athlete in several sports. So he actually desired to come to Howard and go to med school. And there's a funny story. When he applied to Howard's med school, Howard would not accept his English credit from Amherst. Told him that if he wanted to come to Howard, he would have to retake his English courses. But then in the same letter, they offered him a job as an athletic coach for Howard's athletic department.
Of course, he turned down the offer and decided to coach at Morgan instead.
He lived on campus and lived in Bellevue Hall with his players. So when you think about the impact of living in the same building with my coach, who has an Ivy League degree, I mean, the impact that his presence had and what that did for Morgan in terms of establishing that identity, not as a dumb jock, but as a scholar athlete. And that's something that is really lost on a lot of people. That if you look at what Charles Drew did in the sciences, he achieved all of that while still playing for a team. It's really interesting that he then comes back around and ends up at Howard's Med School.
Drew trained many successful scholar athletes at Morgan during a time when African Americans were perceived to not be competent enough to coach teams, play quarterback positions, or even have the intellectual capacity to lead successful athletics. One of these players was Edward Hurt.
Eddie Hurt, or Mr. Hurt, Coach Hurt, was an amazing figure in athletics here at Morgan. He arrived in the 1920s. He is coming to a university that is just in its early adolescence. Morgan was nearly 50 years old at the time he arrives, or nearly 60 years old. He's coming to a place where there is no gymnasium, where there is no organized football field or even athletic program. So he's going to innovate the athletic programming here, not just simply of playing a sport, but the intellectual, social aspects of what a gentleman scholar athlete's to be. He brings in the science of athletics. It's called kinesiology, so the idea in which the body moves, the way in which muscles are isolated, the idea of nutrition. It was a holistic way in which he viewed athletics.
Hurt did some amazing things with little to no resources. He had world-class sprinters, and we didn't even have a track here. So our athletes would literally run up and down the streets and roads of Baltimore City and Baltimore County. But we did a whole lot on the national and world stage with very little to no resources to support what we were doing. The term that he was referred to was a builder of men, builder of champions. Edward Hurt was a graduate of Howard University. He came to us in 1929, 1930, and spent his entire athletic career here. And Edward Hurt had a phenomenal career. I want to say for almost 5, maybe 7 years, his football team did not have a defeat. He had a record of something like 54 consecutive wins and 14 CIAA championships. But he was even not just important to Morgan, but even larger. He was one of the first African-American coaches to coach on an American Olympic team.
Morgan's athletes have always been admired for their capability to merge both academic and athletics successfully. Despite the challenges they were faced with, 150 years later, this same standard that was set by athletic pioneers at Morgan continues. Today, Morgan Athletics has made a name for itself within the state of Maryland.
I think that sports definitely play a major role in the culture at Morgan State University, as they add an element of excitement, an element of competition, and just overall fun, from the homecoming football games to the home track meets.
Homecoming is one of the first things that come to my mind. You know, homecoming is centered around, one, bringing people home for homecoming, alumni, but also the football team and the game that happens on Saturday. Win or lose, it's always going to be a good time on campus.
When Morgan State wins, we win a basketball game, we win a football game, everybody comes together as one big family and just celebrate.
I think that being around other black athletes that are good at my sport, it makes a big impact on the athletic department in the school.
I feel like the athletic programs really affect, Morgan State's campus because, there are events daily, whether it's the football games, the basketball games, lacrosse games, tennis matches. You see sports all around you, and I feel like the students really get into that and, want to show school spirit and school pride.
Sports influence the culture in MSU by bringing a sense of community to everybody, by getting people together and being there for homecoming or even a basketball game and just showing a sense of family. And that's one of the core reasons I came to Morgan State.
I think the current media landscape within the Baltimore, Maryland area has done a tremendous job at covering Morgan State. Morgan State now has the responsibility and is doing a great job at covering itself and telling the stories of its student athletes internally with social media content, student athletes actually telling stories about their own peers.
And we are going to be asking him a couple of questions.
One of Morgan's great alum is William Roden, the former New York Times columnist who now works at Anscape and is associated with ESPN. His body of work is an example of, as a journalist, of excellence. But he started here at Morgan as a football player, and is now giving back to students. One of our students received the Roden Fellowship, which is sponsored by ESPN. Kayla Sweezy, who is a graduate of Morgan who played softball here. So she's an example of a modern day athlete who is a modern day scholar athlete who is from the communication school, who exhibited excellence as a student athlete and now works at ESPN.
I see us being living up to the name National Treasure. You see on campus all of the new buildings, all of the new academic programs, all of the new research programs that are going on. Our athletics department needs to reflect that.
In terms of what Morgan's athletics have done and continues to do, is once again make that community impact, where it's not just simply about playing the sport well, but it's also about understanding your community and your culture, and also bringing Morgan into this future and into this space where we can compete in the classroom, on the gridiron, on the field.
But I'm just hoping that in the future that folks will begin to see HBCUs as diamonds in the rough that have been largely ignored.
So I'm really looking forward to it. We've hired a U.S. Olympian gold medalist as our head coach and Coach Kenny Monday, and we're looking forward to starting that season this year. Acrobatics and tumbling is in the same vein.
It's all about giving us the opportunity, providing the opportunity, because in a lot of cases we weren't given the opportunity, we just took it. And similar resources.
I definitely see the future of sports at Morgan State University being very bright. I think that they're going to continue to expand just as the student population has, just as the campus has. I think it's going to continue to grow and expand. We're going to continue to get more access to resources and more facilities, and I think that the sky's the limit.
I see that it's only going to go forward from here, and because we just got a new athletic director.
I could see a lot of people wanting to come here specifically for the sports.
I see Morgan State's athletic program really expanding and growing to become a top D1 program, not just HBCUs, but especially schools in Maryland. We could really become a powerhouse out here.
As we have seen, the history of Morgan State athletes is one of perseverance and excellence. Today, this tradition continues to inspire and empower the next generation of scholar athletes to excel both on and off the field, shaping a bright future for themselves and their communities.